Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another NLX2 podcast. It's Friday. What else do you have to do? Just listen to this nonstop banter from people that really don't know what's going on. However, this week, got a local celebrity. Okay, this person, we have a cool little story of how we became acquainted and how we actually even met. Everybody in Dickinson knows this person. Very, very active in the community. Very morally just, morally very good person, family man, businessman, very successful businessman at that. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest today. Our guest is Paul Ellerkamp. So Paul Ellerkamp had very humble beginnings. Okay, started at what would be now called Big Sky Barbers. Before he had even bought that, he was an employee there. Well, he ended up wanting to get into the business side, and I will let him talk about all that. But long story short, I was able to meet Paul at that barbershop. From that barbershop, I've never gone anywhere else. I've got to become an acquaintance with Paul and a very good friend with Paul. And from there, he has had a wild journey into a very successful business person and a very successful community person and a very successful father. And it's a pleasure to have him on here this week. And so without any further ado, we'll get through the sponsorships and we will go and hit the ground running. So the Iron Chapel, ladies and gents, come stop by. Classes, one-on-ones, athletic strength and conditioning. Just want to get ripped. Just want to get looking better. Come check it out. Iron Chapel on Facebook, at Coach_Wortman on Instagram. And last week we talked a lot about supplementation and what can do for your body and for your health. Take advantage of that, people. Quit buying Nature Valley supplements. Quit going to Walmart. Take care of your body. Put the good, right amount of things that you need in your body. Think about it like this. If you're going to eat some food, you just want to buy the cheapest food you possibly can, the cheapest thing, and you just want to get it done. Do you think you're going to be healthy? Do you think you're going to look great? Do you think you're going to have health issues down the road? Yeah. With supplementation, spend that extra 5%. And you're going to get a way better product, and what we're doing is giving you 20% off. So check that out. Make sure you're on supplements that are actually doing what they're supposed to do. They're very absorbable, and they have very good testing. Check those out, 20% off. Go to my link in my bio. Click the button. I will get a hold of you, and we will rock and roll. So now that that's all done, without any further ado, I give you the man, the myth, the legend, Paul Ellerkamp. Good afternoon, ladies and gents. I gave you guys an intro before we started this, and I'm very excited to have good friend Paul Ellerkamp on the podcast. Kind of gave you a brief intro, but it was kind of a cool little story, and I'll have you introduce yourself afterwards. But I came here for a recruiting trip, and the first thing that we Googled was a barber shop. My dad needed a haircut, and we went into your 2-stall, you and Matt, like very, very small, but you took care of everything everybody needed. It was really cool. And then from there, it was just the rest is history. And so it was really cool to go from not even knowing Dickinson and being able to get a friendship further down the road. So that was really, really cool. And now everybody knows in Dickinson, you guys got the Porress House of Barberbing. It's a really cool, really, really sweet place. There's a cool culture, and I will talk about that later, but there's kind of a cool culture there that you guys have been able to build. So very briefly, I'll just have you kind of introduce yourself real quick, and we'll go from there, man.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. My name's Paul Ellerkamp, like you said, and people always know me. My kids around here don't know me anything but Barber Paul.
Yep.
and that works good for me. Yeah. And you know, you go through life, and you don't always want to be nailed down to I'm a barber or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I come to grips with, hey, people are going to know me as a barber,
Yep.
and that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And not that I'm ashamed of that, but I always feel like I have more to offer than just being a barber.
Yes. Well, and me knowing you and just what you guys are doing, you're very active in the community. Like we were just talking before we hit record, just this lineage of swimmers, a very, very active in the community of Trinity, of the community everywhere. It's pretty cool to see, and I'm glad we got to get you on here today and we'll start from the get go. This is a very selfish question because everybody knows when you have a good barber, you have good conversations.
Right,
okay,
right.
So we've had many different conversations, but I never kind of got back to the early years with Paul Ellerkamp. So, where'd you grow up? Kind of how did that transpire? Where were you at?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Culbertson, Montana, northeast corner of Montana, 30-minute drive west of Williston or a 30-minute drive north of Sydney.
Okay.
And I it was rural. It's a farming community, but it was kind of the gateway to Canada because it's one of the first ports into Montana that you can go to.
Nice.
So there's a lot of traffic. People talk about flyover country. We had drive-by country.
Yep.
So not many people ever stopped there for anything.
Yeah.
But it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah. How many people that are outside of Dickinson?
About 1,000.
About 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's bigger than I thought. I grew up in Moreland, which is like 5-6 ish. So I mean, it's nice to be a part of those communities. I truly enjoyed it. Everybody, and people that have been in Dickinson long term, like my wife and her family and everybody. It's the same feel. Like
absolutely,
it's just kind of blown up from there. And so there's like this really cool root system of people. So we talked about your kids doing sports. What did you partake in when you were younger?
Well, growing up in a small town, I'm sure it's a lot like what you did. You went and did every sport, and sometimes you did it because you needed the numbers. Mm-hmm. But my main sports were football and track. Average football player, excelled really well at running.
Okay.
So I've had placements in state, things like that, and was fortunate enough to run track and cross country in college.
What? Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Where at?
Right here as a Blue Hawk.
Oh, there we go. I didn't know you ran track here. That's awesome. In all the conversations we've had, we've never had that one. So from there, how was the transition? This is a good question that I've had for myself too. How was the transition from small town to Dickinson? Did it become home quick?
For me, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it was feeling like you're going to a big city, but at the same time, I think the culture of Dickinson, especially 25 years ago, was a little different. Mm-hmm. Really much a German community, but at the same time, a welcoming community. Yeah.
I found that, like, I truly enjoyed, like, going to school and the teacher knowing your name. You're good family friends with them. And I found that here, like, if you go to NDSU, you have a anatomy class of 550 people. Like, here, you know everybody. And in my experience with looking at what you've done and looking what we've been able to do here, I've said this multiple times, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Like, the Dickinson community is probably one of the most giving, accepting communities I've ever seen. Even back home, it's a very small town. The economy crashed, and so, like, a lot of drugs set in, a lot of crime. And here, there's a lot of, you don't even want to say, there's a lot of wealthy people that want other success outside of what they're doing. And so how has that kind of community helped you out?
Oh, tremendously. And it's tenfold what we have given back to the community and what we received. It's I feel in my heart, it's very hard to repay back.
It is.
And so, you always think, if I have this opportunity as my business grows, we want to give back. But at the same time, you don't always have to do big things to give back to your community. Even a lot of times, the most meaningful things in life are small things.
Yeah.
And that's what we've really learned to focus on for right now as our business is maybe our monetary donations can't be that big right now, but we can give back in other ways
events, a lot of stuff like that.
Or just a lot of stuff that what I consider behind the scenes, helping with not necessarily the homeless, but because there's a lot of
less fortunate
people in this town that we give a lot of haircuts away, or don't donate things to the food pantries, things like that. Right now, that's where our focus has kind of been at.
That's really cool.
I think for us, I believe as Pope John Paul II quoted, and it really resonated with me, is how you can view your community is how you see the weakest person in your community treated. And I thought,
wow,
you know what, that's very true. So everyone has their own social, structure, and how are we going to treat those less fortunate than us? And so that's what really resonated with me, to say, okay, might not be able to by myself help pull someone up by their bootstraps, because at the end of the day they have to do that for themselves. But how can we make it easier for them to do it?
Yeah, because Dickinson's a very unique community. Like, we've been affected in both positively and negatively from an oil boom. But I think that the community of Dickinson has done a really good job of trying to set its roots down outside of oil. I mean, you just look at what we're a part of in the downtown district, like all these really cool, the Salt Kitchen, you have all these awesome stores down here, and they've tried to like set their roots outside of it. And you get like this, you said like everybody has this different social structure. But in Dickinson, you have like what you could consider a lot of the elites, a lot of very wealthy, a lot usually in the oil field or medical field. And then there's like a very steep drop off. And like you said, there are a lot of people in our community that are very not fortunate at all. So that's really cool. We started something, so we would approach a business, and that business can get advertising through our gym. We got X amount. We found out how many people walk in our door, how many eyes are going to be set on that banner. So they would put a banner up, and from that banner, they would pay the yearly fee. That yearly fee is actually going to pay for somebody to come get training from me or from any of my trainers. Because if you think about it, all my one-on-one people are athletes with parents that are above middle class.
Sure.
And so it's really cool to be able to serve outside of that, because almost never do I have somebody that's very, not impoverished, but somebody that is below the middle class line. Right. Almost never. And so it's really cool that, like, that's the cool thing about all these businesses that will actually give back and see that this is a just thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I found that I could not be more blessed, and I think you could talk on this too. Being a Blue Hawk actually pays off very well in the end. Like, you can the relationships that you build, the people that you're exposed to, and you get to. I know Dickinson football team, when I was there, did a very good job of instilling the players into the community. Like, you have the Hawk Walk, you have Rent a Hawk, you have all these different things that instill these players into the community. And so, did you kind of feel the same way when you were coming here? It was a different time, though, too.
Absolutely. It was a different time, and they just came off of a oil bust when I came. Okay. So there was a little mini boom back in the late 80s, early 90s. Yep. And then when I came to town, things were pretty depressed as far as the community economic factors were concerned.
Yeah.
So that aspect for me as a track and cross country guy, they were not as active at all that way as far as the outreach to the community was concerned. And I would say at the time, track cross country was probably considered like a secondary sport to football or basketball at the time, even though they had some great talent.
Oh man. Yeah. It must've been, it was probably after you had come when we had multiple Olympic gold medalists, and
that came in, not long after.
Yeah. It was just right there. Yeah. it was crazy talking to Coach Stanton, and I had Coach Leno on here and talking about like, how did we land these guys? Like there's no shot in the world that we should have had these guys here. And it's kind of cool to build the program, and they've had some really great success. What were you more of a longer distance guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
So growing up in Culbertson, we didn't have cross country. So it was just track. And I ran the 800, the mile, and the 2 mile.
Wow.
Usually all in the same track meet.
Oh my gosh. I was.
And they probably threw me in a relay.
Yeah.
You know, also. So, yeah, I really was pretty good at the 2 mile.
Yeah.
And really competitive in the mile.
Yeah.
And not so competitive in the 800. But
yeah, you were built more for long distance, definitely.
Right. I always tell everyone I'm like a freight train. It takes me a 400 at least to get to my ultimate speed.
Yep, and then slowing down too.
Yeah, right.
I was built for about the longest race I did was the 200, and so I've built for like on the football field, built for 40 yards, some oxygen and a sandwich. Like that was it. I'm done after that. But it played in both of our favors. I think it's cool to see a different side of like and it shows the oil money has helped us out a ton.
Absolutely,
an absolute. And I was kind of analyzing just like people coming in the door, and I was very, very worried at the start of the year with the administration that's coming in. What's going to happen? What does that landscape look like for here? Because we will really feel it. And we're kind of thinking about it, but a good majority of our people are related to the medical field, actually.
Right.
A lot of people that want to take care of their bodies, people that will invest in themselves. Because we talked about it a little bit, but like, that oil field life doesn't match up with kind of what we're doing, you know? So I was very worried until we kind of looked at who's coming in the door a little bit. Has that, and I'm sure this is a yes, but how has the oil money, how has the boom of oil affected your guys' business, both positively and negatively?
Well, let's put it this way. You know, if we go back to my humble beginnings in Dickinson, with buying Big Sky Barbers, a 2-chair shop with less than 500 square feet.
I was just going to say, what was the square feet?
Yeah, it was less than 500, and that included a bathroom, right? And we were blessed to have opportunity because of the oil boom to do probably about twice the volume that we would normally do in a day. Every day.
Yep.
And so the blessing of that is we made a lot of money. The curse of it was it probably aged me 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, but
just back to back to back.
Yes. But what it did, it allowed us to build Porress without taking a loan.
Yeah.
You know, so that was the blessing.
That's huge.
Of it. And that was very huge.
Yeah, that's massive. I tell people when I graduated college, I didn't realize how big of a blessing it was to not have any debt. Correct. And to start a business without debt is massive. Like you both know as business people, there's a fine line. Like funding can be very advantageous, but it can also be a curse if you're not in the right business model, if you're not doing what things are right. And I found this interesting, and I kind of know very basically the story behind it, but how did you come up with it? You purchased Big Sky Bar. Let's start there. You were in Fargo, correct?
I was barbering in Fargo.
Okay.
Had my own shop, and that started out with very humble beginnings too, where I was only doing like 3 haircuts a day, not even making a living. But it grew and grew, and it got to the point where like, okay, this is going pretty well, and I had to actually make a decision at that point. Either we're going to, because it was a pretty small shop too, and are we going to expand in Fargo, or are we going to move someplace else? My wife's from Mott. I'm from Montana. A buddy of mine in barber school, Steve, which said, hey, there's a barbershop in Dickinson for sale. He goes, you should check it out.
That's cool.
And I'm just like, okay, you know. He goes, I thought he was really interested and wanted to buy it. And I thought he wanted me to just go over and work it to see what I thought. So I went over for a week and worked with Don Senescold, the guy that owned it at the time. And just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the clientele and Don. I mean, he was just quite the character himself. And I thought, this guy's 68 years old. He wants to be done. Mm-hmm. And so I drove back to Fargo, and I remember walking in the door of the house, and my wife looks at me and says, "When are we moving?" And at the time, she was apprehensive. She didn't want to move back to Western North Dakota.
What was she doing?
She was teaching at Fargo Shanley.
Oh, nice.
At the time. But she enjoyed it there. We enjoyed Fargo. I still enjoy Fargo. But so we're kind of building our lives there. We had 2 kids at the time and going on 3. And, yeah, we were content and happy. But I just thought, I always said to myself, if I ever had a chance to move back to Dickinson and raise kids, I was going to try to take that opportunity because I loved it back in the 90s. It was a great place, low crime, good people. Still is like that. Yeah. We have different challenges, but it's very much a great town to live in. And so, at that time, I called up Steve and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this? Because if you do, that's great, but I want to be a part of it." Yeah. That was going to be my thought. I didn't want to steal his thunder at the time, and we could have probably had a great partnership with it.
So that then. Never he didn't buy in.
He's just like, "No, I have no interest."
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'm just like, okay. Well, I called up Don the next week and said, "Hey, what do you want to do? How much do you need? All this stuff." And that would have probably been in October, and it took me until the end of May to move.
Oh, okay.
So
how was that transition? I started building my name at the rec center, and obviously big box gym. I'm an employee. You mentioned it last time I got my hair cut a little bit, but how was the transition from being a true employee or a 1099, whatever you were, to owning that business?
Well, it was rough, actually. And just for the fact that I wanted Don to be there for at least a year and work the business, introduce me to customers. And I always feel like a hard break is a tough transition at times. But what I realized was, I was making money, but that first year, Don made more money than I did. And I thought, gosh, I own the place, but this guy's, and he wasn't doing anything malicious or anything like that. But here's where it dawned on me was it's relationship building business. And he understood that for a long, long time and was very good at it and better than I am today still at it.
Yeah.
And he's just a very personable guy, very lighthearted, easy to get along with, talks to anyone.
Yeah.
And his best advice to me was when someone gets in your chair, you treat them like they're a king.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter their background. They're the king while they're in your chair.
That 30 minutes is their time.
Yep.
Yeah. We kind of touched on it when I got my haircut last, but you also have, it's kind of cool to have your son now being a barber at your own business, and kind of get into the art. And from the outside perspective, I see people think that cutting hair is just cutting hair. You have to have the tangible skills, the skill set to do anything that anybody wants and make them feel comfortable. However, there's a lot behind it, actually. It's from the outside looking in, there's still a lot behind it. The process, the art of being a barber, what all goes into that, communication, relationships, all that.
Communication's number one, always number one, because if you don't have communication, I cannot give you the haircut you want.
Yeah.
And it's always a learning process. I always say it takes 3 haircuts to really understand what that person wants. Yeah, I might be able to nail it on the first time, but I don't have the full understanding.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because a haircut is just not a haircut. I can view it that way, but to the person who's receiving the haircut, it's not just a haircut. That might mean this is for my wedding. This is for my
Yeah.
job interview, or whatever. This is for my profession, and I got to look good all the time.
Builds confidence.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this really goes to the heart of someone's part of their self-esteem.
Yeah.
So for me, it might be just a haircut, but for the person in my chair, it usually is not just a haircut. Very few people are like, oh, I'll just buzz it off.
Yeah.
You
They know exactly what they're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I found some kind of parallels between what you're doing and what I'm doing here, and it's 100%. Like, first off, you have to provide a quality product. Obviously, you have to provide that product. But from there, if you can find something in common, if you can have a relative that you know each other, you can build this commonality between people. They are a returning client.
Yes.
And it's cool to see, like, yeah, we want you to lose your weight, we want you to get stronger, we want to do all this stuff. But if we can just become friends or have a relationship, it goes well beyond. And same thing with a haircut. It builds confidence. It does all that. You come into the gym and you're working out, you're confident, you feel better, you have more energy, you're doing all these things. And so obviously a quality product, but there's so much more, so much more. And then it takes a little while, as you said. First off, in Fargo, you were doing 3 haircuts a week or a day. Sorry. 3 haircuts a day, and it just wasn't working. Here, you're able to kind of build a rapport. And did that take a little while? Did it take that year about to like get the relationships and build the rapport that you wanted here?
I'd say it took like almost 2 years.
Oh, really?
To really do that. And it's a gradual process. I wish you could just snap your finger and it happens. But it really depends on the individual and how you connect with them.
Yeah.
And that, at the time, being a young barber still, didn't fully understand that.
Yeah.
So I was growing right along with my clients. And that is just something that you learn, that you can show empathy, sympathy, and to someone that may be struggling, and just letting people know that you care.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've really learned is me and you could disagree and be on the polar opposites, but if I can somehow communicate to you that it doesn't matter that we disagree, but I still care about you.
Yep.
That goes a long ways.
It does.
And that's where you start to flourish. And I don't, and when I say those things, I mean it in a genuine way. I don't want to convey to someone I care about them when I really don't.
Yeah.
But I really do have that that interest in seeing the best for people. And one thing that someone challenged me on maybe 10, 15 years ago was trying to be the best version of yourself every day.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee I fail at that.
Me too.
And so how do you get up every day, say, okay, I'm going to try to be the best version of myself today?
Yeah.
And that then once you kind of know, okay, this is working for me, how can I challenge someone else to be the best version of themselves?
Yeah.
And
it's deeper there.
So when you have a 20 minutes to a half hour, sometimes conversations are very light, or you can get in very much in depth.
Yeah.
And it's usually that conversation will continue throughout like a whole year.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
When you get them in a chair.
Exactly. Because like the person this is how I look at it. When I have a person come into the gym, this is their recess. This is their whole outlook of me. Is that 1 hour. That's their outlook of me. They don't see me with 30 other people that day. And so it's like it's a quick snapshot into what you're doing, And I think it's a lost art. I found, so this podcast started off with me interviewing high school athletes because COVID hit and I wanted to still get them some scholarships.
Sure.
And I had a network of coaches and all these people, and I started pushing it out and got very successful scholarships for some of these kids. But a lost art is communication, and I found that out very, very hard with these high school kids. Like I was really digging and like trying to get them to talk, but showing it's a lost art when you disagree with somebody, that it's not instantly polarizing and it's not instantly mad. It's try to think what they're thinking. Like
Right.
try to find where they're at and come to this common place. And I feel like my generation, plus or minus 5 years, I didn't have a cell phone till I was in high school. I didn't have these things, so communication was still part of it. You get off of 5 to 10 years past that, it's different. They don't know how to communicate as well.
Right.
It's crazy. And I wanted to kind of go over, because I was getting to this, but your story of going from Big Sky into DePorress, and very basically, how did you guys come up with the name of Porress House of Barbering? And then we can kind of get into the good stuff.
Well, that was interesting because we had a lot of name. We knew we wanted to change the name. Not that there was anything wrong with Big Sky, because it's been around since 1965.
Oh wow!
But we knew what we were going to be doing at DePorress was going to be different than what we were going to be doing at Big Sky. And one of the other things was when you opened up a phone book or anything like that, there was 11 to 12 different names of Big Sky.
Yes.
Right. And so we thought, okay, what we're looking for is, we didn't want to sound like we're going to come off as like a sports bar. And so we had tons of different names, and none of them we were really stuck on. And Matt and I were driving home from Bismarck one day, and we were Googling names and what they meant and things like that. And I think the name was Debonair. And like I've heard the name, I kind of know what it means, and I asked Matt to Google it. And it was kind of funny. He must have misspelled it or something. But the first name that came up was DePorress, and it was St. Martin DePorress. And I thought, and I'm like, well, we're Catholic. And Matt clicked on it. He's just like, huh. He goes, this guy is the patron saint of barbers. I'm like, and then we come to find out, well, what does DePorress mean? Well, St. Martin, in the English translation, it'd be Martin the Poor, where he helped the poor. Yeah. And how he fed, clothed, housed them and things like that. And he was a barber, and one of the ways he got money to help the poor was providing haircuts. Wow. And he was considered a minority. He was black, and he was in Peru, and very much a Spanish-dominated area, but he was shunned because he was black. And I just kind of thought all those things kind of come into play with what we are about a little bit. And so it was not, before we even hit Glen Olin, we'd already decided, this is going to be the name of it. So
that's really cool. I knew most of the backstory, but not all of it. So I really like that. And I think it plays to your guys' strengths, what you guys are doing, what you guys are trying to accomplish. And going from Big Sky, very, very small shop. You possibly had a few SKUs in your place selling hair gels and that stuff. How was that transition from very small to a ton of moving parts? You now have how many employees?
Well, if you include me and Matt as an employee, I think there's 15 of us generally.
Yeah, that's a huge jump. How was the transition from that to all these moving parts?
Right. Well, it was an evolving deal. We started out with, when we opened our doors, I think that we had 4 barbers, 3 or 4 barbers, and we had 3 people working the lounge. Yeah. And overwhelming would be the the best way to put it. So, and just juggling some of the things of not knowing the bar industry was a big learning curve for us and how that worked. You would think it'd be easy. We buy beer, you sell beer. There's just a lot that goes into it that you would never think. So
setting all that up, and
yes, yep.
That's kind of what I wanted to touch on too. Like, you guys have built a culture there, and I was trying to think about this not last night but the night before when I was going over all this stuff. Like, the culture there is something you would almost see in like when I traveled to Germany. It has those roots, but it also has the roots of like Western Montana, Colorado, like this really cool lounge with the barbershop in the back. Like, how did you guys, and this is very open-ended, but how did you guys build that culture? How did you guys build, was it almost like a manifestation? Like the people you want to bring in, you're going to almost elicit, but like, how did you guys build that?
Well, I think for one thing that Matt and I understood was we're homebrewers by just something we like to do.
Yeah.
And we knew there was a culture of craft beer. And we believed that if we had this at our barbershop, people would come. Mm-hmm. We never thought it would morph into what it is today. But we just thought, well, if we can sell a few beers while we cut hair or people are waiting, that'll be
perfect
for us. Within a month, we realized, oh, this is going to be a bigger beast than we thought. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, we never went down the road of domestic beer for the fact that you can get it everywhere.
Anybody has it.
And so it wasn't about us making money right away. We thought, yeah, if we can make money off beer while we're cutting hair, great. But it was not like, okay, it was not part of our business model for say like, yeah, if we can make an extra couple bucks here and there, great. Mm-hmm. But then we realized we can go down a road that's not the easiest road to make money in the beer industry. Mm-hmm. But we realized if we could get good craft beer and rotate them fast enough out, people would come continuously for it and enjoy it. And that's what those craft people are about. Yep. Most craft people don't buy a case of beer. No. They buy maybe a six-pack. In fact, they prefer maybe a crowler or if they can find four-packs. Yep. And then when they're done with that 4-pack, they're on to something else.
On to the new thing.
And so that's what we realized. So we call it the one-off program. We get a keg of beer in. When it's gone, it's gone. We go to something else new as well. It builds
exclusivity of that beer to some extent.
Yes.
There's one keg, you got to come in and get it. I really enjoyed that because anywhere else, Dickinson hasn't completely gone to like the Western Montanas yet, where we have breweries everywhere and you can interchange, and we've been able to have fat fish. Mm-hmm. But looking at the Porress, there's a reason why when I was starting my business, I went there almost every single day and sat down on my computer, and it was my coffee shop, know? And so I feel that it has a different feel. You can go to, I go to their business all the time, but you can go to Blue 42, you can go to these different places, but you don't get, the beers you guys get aren't regular circulating craft beers.
Correct.
Yep. Like it's the outlandish people that are doing really cool stuff. And so that's why I gravitated towards it, but that's that culture of that craft beer person, And so and correct me if I'm wrong, was it a German roots where they had a lounge in the front with the barber shop in the back? Where did that come from?
It was a European
thing?
Yeah, we totally ripped it off. So we weren't creative in that way at all. It was actually that they had their barbershops in front and their kind of speakeasy lounge bar in the back. And my thought was, when we were looking at that concept, was, well, if I have the barbershop in front, who's going to know about the back? Yeah. Unless then I'm constantly inviting people to the back. And so we flipped it around so everyone that walked through our doors can see what we're doing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because everybody knows you as Paul the Barber. So they know you can do you're a barber.
Right.
But now they can see the bar in the front. That's very cool. What has been the hardest? What has been the one single hardest thing as you transition from the smaller business into that? The bar sales, the employees.
Well, always keeping good employees is difficult in our environment. I think it's getting a little easier right now, but with that being said, I've been blessed with a great team where we've had very little turnover here in the last 2 years.
Good.
But I would just say the hardest thing I would say is owner operator is juggling everything. It's like you have that 3-legged stool, but if you lean one way or the other, you're bound to fall a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, keeping your focus on where your main focuses need to be and putting trust in certain employees to keep things going the way you want them to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing it would be is for me was, okay, you go to a 2-chair shop where we sold a little bit of cigars and gave away a little bit of beer. And, that was manageable in that small environment. But when you're talking 2,500 square feet and you're in back cutting hair and you're relying on someone up front to sling beers or cigars, it's a different story.
Yeah. So we hired a few new people, and the hardest thing for me, and I don't know if it was for you, but the hardest thing for me was delegation. It's not, to some extent, it could be a control thing. Like you want your business to run how it is, but the most successful people are the best at this, at delegating responsibility. And I found myself personally struggling very hard with that because even in your situation and mine, it started off with you control everything within your barber chair.
Right. Exactly.
It's very hard to push that out. Did you struggle with that at the very beginning?
To begin with, my military background helped me a lot with that. But it's when you get out of that for a little bit, then you're like, all right, how do I communicate my ideas to someone without coming off as rude?
Yeah.
Or I want it done this exact way. So it was a struggle there for a little bit, especially that first 6 months of getting going. And not everyone sees the vision that you see.
Yeah.
Right? Or where you want it to go. But I think some, goals are very important to have, and having that vision to get there is very good. But you almost have to be a little accepting of it might vary a little bit the way you get there from where you think the way it's going to get there.
Yeah.
And being open to things that you wouldn't normally be open to, or different ideas.
Yeah.
So
I think you guys have done a very good job with it. Obviously, you guys have built a very good team of people there, and that's why it's so enjoyable to go there. But you had mentioned and this is something in my life, the reason why I have a lot of people on, like I just got a Canadian Special Forces guy that's one of my cousin's best friends, and he does executive protection for all these different people. Very cool. Yeah. But I have one regret in my entire life. I've never regretted anything, and it was the decision between college football and the military. I mean, I was already through the process, went to MEPS. I mean, going to the military.
Okay.
How was that? I mean, what was your military background? What branch were you in?
Well, I did 4 years Army, 4 years Army Guard.
Okay.
So that's my background in it. I started out as just an infantry soldier, 11 Bravo, and eventually became a mechanic, which was a 63 Bravo. But in between there, I became airborne, not a ranger, just a trooper, paratrooper. Yep. So that's, but I enjoyed my experience in the military, but I knew it wasn't everything I wanted to do. I think there's always something that when I was a kid, I glamorized, like the old John Wayne movies and things like that.
Top Gun and all these things.
Yes, Top Gun. And I thought, man, I can do that. And I always wanted to be, there was always something in my mind that said, I want to serve my country. And the way I did was not the way I expected to, but I come to the realization everyone has their part in how you do that. And I don't think you have to be in the military to do that. Looking back on it, that was the path I chose. But there's a lot of different ways you can serve your country, your community, in a lot of different ways that are just as admirable as doing it in the military.
Yeah. Did you? So this is right after college, then, before barbering.
Before barbering, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And did you have aspirations of doing more than 8?
No, at that point,
You were done.
It's just the military, to me, for the military and having a family life was not conducive.
Yeah.
A lot of people make it work. I just knew the way I wanted my family to be, it was not going to work.
Yeah.
So I got out in the military in 98.
Okay.
And that was the year my first son was born.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And for me, that's having a wife and getting ready to start a family helps deal with that. It's not even anxiety, but the regret, like I have something else that is much better, but to this day, it's something that eats at me, like even recent years thinking about going into the reserves, like something that I've always gravitated towards too. And maybe did you have a lot of family in the military?
My dad was.
Okay.
My grandfather was. And prior to that, we were German heritage. So my great-grandfather was in World War I, but on the German side.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's cool. Maybe that's why, for me too, it's just a lot of family interest in it. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but how has the military lifestyle? Was it the uniformity? Was it the brotherhood? What helped you have success, tangible success in the business world?
Well, for number one, the thing I miss the most is the brotherhood.
100%.
There's nothing that can really compare to it in my life. My wife even gets jealous sometimes when I talk about people and how passionately I talk about them. But it's the experiences that we had. Not that I didn't have any wartime experience, but the training, the bonding was just phenomenal in that way. But with that was you were the same thing that people in the military will always complain about. It's the same thing that's the most important. It's the repetition of training and doing it and doing it and keep on doing it. And it's like being the best version of yourself. You keep on doing some things until you get it right and honed and everything like that. And that's what at the end of the day, what do you call it? Perseverance. Yeah. In a lot of ways. And that's how business is.
100%.
You're going to have failures. You're going to have successes. You're going to have a lot of in between, You're going to get the slivers in your hands and everything like that. And you're going to get beat up a little bit along the way, but it's the perseverance of getting there.
Yeah. In the military, usually a lot of times people, travel is associated a lot. Where did it take you? Where did you originally do basic? Where did it take you all the way through the 8 years?
Sure. Fort Benning, Georgia was where I did basic and AIT. And that's where I did my jump school as well.
Oh, okay.
Was there. I also spent some time at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay. Nice.
So had some real quick stints in Germany and Kuwait, but nothing like by that time I was a mechanic.
Yeah.
And we were in at a time where the budgets were pretty tight. So we were over there cannibalizing vehicles and taking parts off to bring them back to make other machinery work. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So
and nowadays it's much different. Well, when the Trump administration was in, they pretty much got a green card for whatever they really wanted.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
It's pretty crazy. And looping back around kind of to business in Dickinson and business in the era of 2020. You and I had very similar perspectives on kind of what is happening with COVID and how it affected us in the business world. But how was navigation of the COVID era with both yours and I's profession we got shut down to some extent for a short amount of time. Like how was the navigation of that COVID?
Frustrating.
Yeah, very.
No, I guess knowing what I know now, I would have never closed my doors.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't, that's another rabbit hole we can go down. But I would say it was a very good learning lesson of if things in the future to come.
Yeah.
If they were how I would do it different. And that I understand why we closed down. And at the time, we didn't know how.
Fear was high.
Yeah, fear was high, and we didn't know exactly what we were dealing with as far as the virus was concerned. And, I think that at the overall, that 6 weeks that we were off, it was actually a good time for us to reevaluate where we were going and how we could do things better going forward. So, reentry was right off the bat was gangbusters and going great. And, we got the wrench thrown in there with my brother getting that brain tumor.
Yeah.
And that really threw us for a loop more than anything. More than that was harder than for me personally than going through COVID and not working for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But in a way, I think God told me at that time, hey, you needed to slow down and take a breather.
Yep.
And so it was very good for me that way.
I found almost the exact same experience. I was very reluctant. We had an owners meeting, and then we had a group thread, and they're like, hey, do we need to shut this down? And I was so reluctant right off the bat that I was pushing back. And I said, if my philosophy was, if you're at risk, please don't come, please. And then I kind of came to the realization that I do really well, and I'm sure you do too. A lot of entrepreneurs do. I do very well with a lot of stuff on my plate. Like it keeps me, just like we were talking about with your kids, it keeps me active, keeps me going. If not, I feel like, and I'm probably not, but I feel stagnant. And so I found that the day that we shut down the doors, I grabbed a note card because I like writing better than throwing notes in my phone. I grabbed a note card and like things I can do while not working. Like what can I do here? What can I do at home? And man, I threw on a damn apron every night and I had dinner ready for my wife. Like she was still working. So I had these things that I could really slow down and reevaluate, and it actually helped grow us right off the bat. Yep. We were anywhere from 15 to 18% with whatever metric you want to take of busier, having more people in the door right away. And so that helped out a lot. And I think it was God saying, slow down a little bit. In your situation, even more so. You guys shut down, and was it within weeks that you guys had found out about Matt?
So we came back to work May 1st.
Okay.
And the weekend of the 15th, 16th,
oh, yeah, 2 weeks.
Matt and I were on our way to Fargo when he had his episode.
Man.
So, yeah, so that really threw us for a loop.
Yeah.
Because Matt is like me. He's a workhorse. So, yeah, any time you get someone like that goes down, that you can't replace that productivity quick enough.
No.
And not that we ever wanted to replace Matt.
No.
But there's certain parts of, as he's my brother and my partner, protectionism, right?
Yeah.
I need someone temporarily. Can you come help me for this time?
It's not permanent.
But it's
You've probably still felt some of that. Some of the workload still come over to you. I'm guessing. Because
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because he's not completely full time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I don't foresee that happening for several months still. He just finished up his last round of chemo last week.
Awesome.
And looking good, feeling good.
Awesome.
So we're really happy
good
about that. So
how has that been? I got into business with a very good friend, but not a brother. And I'm sure there's been some of the best things in the world because you guys know each other very well, but also it's hard. How has that been?
Yeah, I think anytime you get in a business relationship with anyone, it can be tricky. And I would say being in business with my brother is a blessing and a curse. Because they do know you so well, and there are certain things that brothers will say to each other that they would never say to anyone else, right? Yeah. But that is okay, because sometimes you need that little bit of a punch in the mouth, whether it comes in words than more than physically. But you need that, because it's a good challenge. But we figured out through the years that we've been working together that communication is key, and we've learned that at the end of the day, you might offend me, but we're still brothers.
Yeah.
And that comes first above the business.
100%.
So if we can realize that, if we super disagree, one of us is going to back down for the sake of our brother relationship.
Yeah. Have you guys been able, it was called what was it called? The School Bus. It was a book by something Ramsey. I forgot the author's name, but they talk about like, you have to, so the school bus is your business. You have your driver, which is your owners. But how have you guys played to your guys' strengths? Like, you have the people, and how do you get them in the right spot on the bus? Like, have you and Matt specifically been able to play to each other's strengths fairly well?
I would say yes. And sometimes you have to embrace something whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and this is no shun on Matt. I'm a little more personable than Matt is.
Yeah.
But Matt's strengths are he's very analytical. He understands financial stuff a lot better than I do. So that goes to his strengths, where I'm more of the PR guy.
Yeah.
I always joke with people and say I spend the money and Matt
makes
the money. So
you have to have all those people too. I would consider myself like the more social kind of person, but I also do a lot of the finance stuff. But it's not my strength by any means. Definitely not. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on, dude. Did you think of anything? You think of anything you want that I missed or anything?
Oh man, we could probably talk all day.
Easily.
About things,
just plug in COVID and politics, and we could go. We could go pretty far.
So, no, I just feel we were blessed to be in Dickinson.
Yeah.
And have overall great futures, I believe, and we have a community that has a wonderful culture of faith and family. Yeah. And for everyone that's a little different, but it's still, like you said, a very good, prominent part of our.
I never realized that until I married my wife too. Having a local family, like, you don't realize. I was looking up numbers and I totally forgot, but like, what's the percentage of North Dakotans that are Catholic? And it's one of the top states. It's pretty cool. Like, I didn't have that. I grew up Baptist back home, but I never had that tight group of people that Dickinson has. And I think it's played to your strengths and it's played to mine as well, man. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on, man. It was a blast. If anybody wants to find you, just Porress on Google and your website and all that.
Yeah.
Cool.
theporresshouse.com.
Yep.
Is the website, but we're on Facebook, Instagram.
Awesome. Yep. Well, anybody in Dickinson knows who you are. So if you are coming to Dickinson, we'll have to hit you up. So I appreciate it, man. We will, I'll probably be getting a haircut here soon. So everybody, that is another NLX2 podcast. If you guys need to reach out to me, reach out to Paul, and we can put you in the right direction. So thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next week.